Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here and welcome back to the railway. Today I'm looking at a diesel shunter from Hornby. I've owned a couple of 08 shunters in the past, but both of them have been made by Bachmann. One thing I've never tried is the Hornby 08 shunter, however I have heard an awful lot about them. The thing is though, depending on who you talk to, you get a different story. I've heard some people say the Hornby 08 is fantastic and better than the Bachmann one. I've heard others say, well, they prefer the Bachmann one. I've heard some people say the performance is superior on the Hornby one, great runners. I've heard others say they're stuttery performers, they make loads of noise and they're really hard to fix. So even though I've heard a lot about the Hornby 08 shunter, I've actually got no idea what it's like, and to say I'm curious about it is a bit of an understatement. So to find out for myself, I have finally picked up a Hornby 08 shunter in this very interesting Stratford Depot livery, which is kind of like an orange or tan colour. Very interesting indeed. And I'm really looking forward to taking a look at this to see what the differences are between this and the Bachmann one. One difference that I am aware of so far is the price difference. The Hornby 08 shunter is incredibly expensive at £185.99. And this is one of the reasons why I have never tried one of these. Just seems like too much to pay for a small locomotive. Having said that, I think this is a newer model than the Bachmann 08, so perhaps it's more complex, perhaps that's why it's so expensive. It is, however, quite a bit more expensive than the Bachmann 08, which costs £149.95 at RRP, meaning the Hornby one costs 25% more. So I would certainly expect to see 25% more value in this Hornby 08. So we're going to get this out today, let's see what it's like, and let's see if it's worth the money. And if you'd like to try one, I've got affiliate links down in the description for you. So let's get started. So right off the bat, I have to say the box seems to be very heavy indeed. So hopefully that means the loco inside is also super heavy. And it certainly should be, because £185.99 is an awful lot, I think, for a smallish loco like this. I should also say I did not pay that for this. I bought this from a retailer for £129.99. Still quite a lot of money though, so high expectations for sure. Let me show you the end of the box then. So the product code on mine is R3899. It's the BR060 Class 08 and it's number 08715. And if I show you the back of the box, we've actually got a nice history of the 08 shunter there. So pause and read that if you'd like, although I do have a bit of background to give you in just a second. For now though, I've not had this box open yet. This will be my first look at this 08 in this livery. So let's open this up and let's take a first look. Wow, look at the difference. Look how much more orange this looks. Gosh, that's weird. And what's that? There's a bit of black tape or something in the box. Hopefully that's not made a sticky mess on the loco. Anyway, yeah, that's not what I was expecting at all. Yeah, it's a much more vivid orange than, well, on the box, but also on the online listings too. Gosh, well, I do like an unconventional livery, so in theory I should quite enjoy this. Let me pull the blister out, okay, and let's have a look at some of the paperwork. We've actually got a couple of items in here. Let's take a look at the regular instructions to start with. So this is for the Class 08 or the Class 09, very nice. See if we can get a sense of the mechanism. Alright, so lubrication, yeah, that's standard, just the crank pins and the axles. Where to fit the buffer beam accessories. How to remove the loco body. Looks like it's screwed together with 4 screws. That looks nice and secure. How to remove the motor. Why do we want to remove the motor? How strange, I've never known Hornby include instructions on how to remove the motor. Is it a motor that's likely to break down then? Don't know. And then DCC ready, yeah, it's got an 8-pin socket inside the loco there, which is a bit dated by modern standards. You'd probably want a Next 18 in there these days. I'm not sure if it's got any lights on board or anything, but I would hope so, given the price. And then not too much to see on the back. And then what's this extra one? A little bit more on body removal. They obviously forgot something in the main instructions. To access the front body to chassis fixing screws, the tanks will need to be removed. Oh, marvellous. Carefully lever the 2 tanks up and out of the location holes as shown. Well, hopefully they've not been glued in place then, otherwise that's going to be tricky. Right, gosh, well that's crammed in there, isn't it? Almost completely fills this blister pack. And we do have an accessories bag on the top, so let's have a look at that first. Got some nice foam around the packaging to help cushion it, that's good. Alright, so yeah, this is very simple, literally just buffer beam pipework, and that appears to be all. And nicely moulded and painted as well, which is also good to see. Alright, well let's have a look at the quality of the paint then. Let's see if this has got a quality finish that you'd expect for over £180 at the full price. This seems to open a bit differently. Yeah, the walls come undone as well. Alright. Wow, gosh, that is incredibly vivid, isn't it? Hopefully the camera will do that justice. Yeah, it's bright orange. How very odd. Okay, well, I'm aware that this is a very detailed model, so I'll lift it gently. And here it is, for the first time ever for me, the Hornby 08 Shunter. And yeah, it seems to have a decent amount of weight to it. The Bachmann one, though, is incredibly heavy, so whether it's heavier than that, I don't know. I'll weigh them in just a second. But yeah, a few things hitting me. First of all, obviously, the livery. And the quality of the paint looks to be very high indeed. We've got some complexity here, which we'll look at in just a second. The other thing I've noticed is the level of detail. There is a lot going on here. Tons of separate parts. I can see wiring or pipe work that I don't think was present on the Bachmann example. Yeah, quite obviously this is a complex model, which does explain why it should be relatively expensive. But whether it's worth the money is yet to be seen, so we'll have a much closer look at this in just a second and figure that out based on the features. For now though, let's have a little bit of background on the 08 Shunter in real life. The Class 08 was a very early but very numerous class of British diesel shunter introduced in 1952. Almost 1,000 of these were built over a 10-year period, and they were loosely based on the LMS 12033 design, and they also looked very similar too. Of course, though, they were considerably updated with English Electric 6-cylinder engines and dual motors from the same builder. Variations in the design over the years meant that different motors were used in different engines. Some designed for higher voltages than others. Most were only capable of reaching a maximum speed of 15 miles per hour though, while some of them could stretch up to 20. For many years, the 08s could be seen at countless stations and freight yards, and even to this day, roughly 100 of them remain either in preservation or in use on industrial premises. Among the preserved examples is the first ever built, which was number 13000 or 13046. So there it is up close and personal for you, the Hornby 08 Shunter in the Stratford Depot livery. The Stratford Depot, incidentally, being a depot in Stratford. Someone's done their research. No, but it's been there for a long time, many years, and it's where they do locomotive maintenance and that kind of thing. But anyway, here is the loco, and yes, it is much more complex than the Bachmann 08 in terms of detail. There's a lot more parts to this, better moulding, etc, etc. However, I'm not entirely convinced that this is better than the Bachmann 08, because to me it doesn't seem to be quite as well built. So let's talk about that first of all. First of all, it is lighter than the Bachmann 08 by over 10 grams at 223 grams, which I think is confusing if not unacceptable given how much more expensive this model was. So while I'm sure it does have a die-cast chassis and such, the body itself is just made of plastic, and that includes the running plate as well. So certainly an awful lot of money for a plastic-bodied locomotive. Also, I think possibly because of the added complexity, the build quality isn't that great either. So we have got wonky parts. This handrail on the side of the door here has not been fitted correctly. That should not really have gotten through quality control checks. We've got visible glue on some of the other parts. There's quite a smear here, hopefully you can see that. And then there's the odd mark on the paintwork as well, where perhaps it hasn't been handled that carefully at the factory. There's a few separate parts where the paint has chipped off them. That's not the greatest look. And then we've got this opening door, which is an incredible feature, and I have to say I like it very much, but the door doesn't shut properly. As you can see, it kind of gets stuck slightly ajar. So you've got this awesome feature, which is great fun, but let's be honest with you, you're going to use that feature once for your amusement. And then for the entire lifetime of the model, you've got this door with giant gaps around it that doesn't look like it's closed properly. Not to mention the amount of development and cost involved in producing this feature. So as much as I love the feature, I have to question why that was included, because no doubt it would have put up the price and the model is a bit worse off because of it. So super detail is fantastic, complexity is great, but complexity for the sake of complexity is a little bit pointless in my opinion, particularly in this day and age. For me, this could have been built a little bit more economically, I think. But anyway, let's have a look at what the model has got. The decoration, as weird as it is in this very bright orange, is done very well. So the finish is okay. I would say it's a moderately satin finish, although we have seen better. There's quite a bit of printed detail on here too. We've got this little mascot. Don't quite recognise that. Is that something to do with the Stratford depot? Looks like a bird of some sort. We've got the running number on the side of the cab, below which we've got the builder's plate. There's the high voltage warning signs across the body, which are excellently printed. And we've even got the little tiny door handles picked out on the doors. Again, that's been done very finely. We've got the grills across the side of the body. These are not separately fitted, but they are separately painted, so they look excellent. We've got the lids of the various boxes across the running plate, which have been separately picked out, as has the roof, and it is very cleanly painted at that. On the ends, of course, we have got the wasp stripes, and these are done really excellently, on a par with Bachmann quite easily. And here's a look at the other end, where we've also got the front grille, which again looks probably even better than Bachmann's actually. You get a nice sense of relief with that grille, which is great too. In terms of detail, the moulded detail is a lot better than Bachmann's. If I just show you this section of the body and then bring in the Bachmann 08 in the same position, yeah, you can see there is quite a difference in the moulding there. You can tell the Hornby one is a bit more modern. It is the separately fitted detail though that makes this loco really stand out. The underframe is particularly impressive. We've got pipework going underneath the running plate, which is separately fitted. The brake rigging is all there and very complex too. And around the back, there's all sorts of different separately fitted pipework and various components, not to mention the tanks at the front, which are also separately fitted. The body is similarly complex as well. We've got all of these little cabinet handles, which are fully separately fitted. Most of these metal and wire, except for this main handrail across the body, which is just plastic and a little bit more flimsy. Without the separate detailing, the buffer beams do look quite bare, and unfortunately there are no screw-link couplings included. However, the buffers themselves are made of metal and they're also sprung. So that's a fine touch, yeah, I like that very much. And above there we've got separately fitted lamps, although these don't appear to be real working lamps. For nearly £200 at the full price, that is a surprise. Again, working lighting is pretty much a norm these days. I think this should have had it, but at least it does have the wiring and such separately fitted. And then there's tons of pipework and stuff around the front radiator, and there's even these little rings on the top which are separately fitted. That is quite unbelievable, and there's a fair few of those up towards the top of the model, which is very impressive indeed. On the top of the cab we've got this vent which is openable. Again, that's quite a cool feature. I mean, certainly this model has a lot of features, there's no doubt about that. And then around the other side we've got this horn, which is a little bit wonky looking, made of plastic of course, but I guess it does do the job. Around the back we've got more complex detailing, such as the flush glazing, which looks good, and we've got the separately fitted wipers too, which are very fine. There's more wiring for the lamps on the back, and again the lamps are separately fitted here too, although again they don't appear to be working. The cab interior is better than the Bachmann one. There are some separately fitted components this time, although there's not very much of it that's painted, so it is kind of a bland looking cab, but the detail is there. It's just a pity again for this price that they couldn't have picked out some more of those details, but certainly not a bad cab. So there you go, that is a close look at the Hornby 08. Very complex, reasonably heavy, over 200 grams, not as heavy as the Bachmann one, and while it does have a lot more detail than the Bachmann one, the build quality is noticeably less good. So at the moment it's really not clear which is the best. I think for me at least they're probably even at the moment, because they both do well in different areas. But I've not looked at the mechanism yet, I've not tested the performance. This is where a gap could potentially open up. So let's get this down onto the track and let's see how it works. So there it is down onto the track, the Hornby 08 Shunter, and I've just filmed the initial performance test and running in, and I'll show you how all that went in just a second. After that though, I did my usual disassembly to look at the mechanism, and that's what I'm going to present for you now. So first of all, from the outside, there are no visible pickups on this loco, which I thought was quite intriguing. So I removed the base keeper plate using the 3 screws, expecting to see some sort of split chassis design, perhaps where the pickups are done through the axles. Well, no, that wasn't actually the case. We've got proper wiper pickups. They're just built into the centre of the chassis here, so that they're pretty much completely invisible from the outside of the body. Now they do appear to be hardwired in place, which means removing these pickups to clean them or adjust them is going to be a real nightmare. So not particularly serviceable, but I am glad to see proper wiper pickups rather than a kind of split chassis setup. Also, there are proper bearings on the driving axles, which is great to see. That suggests real good quality. And it's just a nice simple single axle drive. Nice red gear here. Seems to be quality gears in this model as well. Body removal is relatively straightforward. You have got those tanks to remove, and I think they might have been glued in with just a dab of glue, but it was reasonably easy to overcome that with the flat-bladed screwdriver as described on that little sheet. Then you've just got the 4 screws to remove. No proper threads for these screws, they just kind of bite into the plastic body, which seems to be a very cheap way of doing things, and I'm not sure how long those threads will last, but for this one disassembly that seemed to be okay. And inside you've got a very impressive die-cast chassis with some decent weight to it actually, and this massive 5-pole motor, which is the same kind of motor used in some of Hornby's massive steam locomotives. To say they've managed to fit that motor into this much smaller loco is really impressive and also much needed. That motor produces some great torque, which is really good to see in an 08 Shunter. You've also got the 8-pin DCC decoder socket, which is nice and accessible, although slightly dated. I think a Next 18 would have been a little bit better. It's also a bare bones chassis in that there are no special features on board, so no lighting in the cab or the lamps, nothing like that, and no speaker pre-fitted. Again, for the price of the model, I think that is quite surprising. And then the back-to-back gauging comes in quite reliably at 14.3mm each, which is just a hair below the standard, pretty much exactly in line with other locos. So a good quality mechanism overall, very light on features and not that serviceable, but I've certainly seen worse. Anyway, with that, let's move on to performance and let me show you how that first test went. Alright, moment of truth then. I've heard quite a bit about how these run, a lot of it conflicting, so at last it's time for me to find out for myself. So forwards direction, does it work at all and how well does it run? Let's see. Giving some juice. It's now at 50% power. It started to move and then it cut out, so not a good start, but it hasn't run in yet. That's at half power. That's full power. Right. Brand new, very expensive. Not a great start. Now, obviously, it will need time to run in before I can cast a judgment on the performance, but not a strong start. It does seem to be very slow, though. That is 50% speed. So it is now moving at half power, which is good. Is there any torque there? Well, actually, yes. Didn't seem like there was going to be to start with. It is stopping on that point every single time, which is annoying. Alright, so yeah, the performance seems to be improving quite a bit. I have to say, despite everything else, the gearing is really, really good. Better than Bachmann's, actually. That's half speed, so it's very much reflecting the prototype in how slowly it goes. I wonder what full speed looks like. It's probably not going to be that quick. Let's have a look. Full speed. That's it. That is full speed. And it does get over the points at that speed as well, which is good. Now, obviously, as I film this, I've not looked at the mechanism yet, so I don't know about the flywheel, but let's cut it off. Yeah. I mean, the Bachmann one is not like that really. The Bachmann one will keep itself going for quite a long time because of a big flywheel it's got. Well, if this has got a flywheel, it's not having much of an effect because it's stopping dead. But okay, fair enough, it does need to run in. Maybe things will loosen up after it's done that. Let's have a look and see what the crawl is like then. If it's geared to run slow, then it should be incredible if the pickups can sustain power. So let's see. I'm easing it up gently. A little more. Yeah, it seems to be going. Alright, so again, to say it's not run in, that I would say looks quite promising. Looks as though, as long as it's reliable, this thing will be able to do some real shunting. You've got a lot of control over it, and I'm slowly accelerating it. Yeah, it seems to be nice and smooth, it really does. And in reverse, yeah, that is fantastic. I would say this is giving Bachmann a run for their money then. Reliability remains to be seen, I would say. Let's go for about this sort of speed. Let's go over the express point. Remember, the wheelbase of this loco is larger than the dead zone of the express point, so it should not stop. And yet it does. Right, let's give it a little nudge, see if I can get it to continue. Stopped again on the same point. And there we go, it's over. So yeah, it needs to run in. Hopefully those pickups will become more reliable once it's had chance to run in, because at the moment it is stopping on points. So I'd hate to have to certify this as Electrofrog only, but at the moment, yeah, this is not able to perform well at all over express points unless you really turn it up to above 50. And to be fair, at that speed it is doing okay, but anything below 50 by the looks of it seems to stop it. Although not on that occasion. So yes, I think what we really need to do now is run this in and see if we can get this to become more reliable. And it seems to be improving already. So it's looking promising. Let's go for 50% speed. Let's see how it gets on. Alright, so here it goes. The bright orange 08 Shunter off around the layout. Yeah, it is quite the livery, isn't it? And away from the points, perfectly reliable. And also no massive noise. I've heard people say the Hornby 08 screeches awfully. Maybe this will in a decade or so, but right now, as it's brand new, it's running nice and quietly. There is a bit of motor noise, but there's certainly nothing in the way of screeching, which is good to see. So it seems to be nice and reliable. It's staying on the track at least, so it's sure-footed. And it's also really refreshing to see a loco that is geared so realistically. If this thing was running along at a scale speed of 50 miles per hour, that would have been a complete waste. Yeah, it's geared sensibly, half speed looks about right for this, so some decent thought has been put into the design of this, which is really, really good. So I'll let this run in fully. It's going to have 30 minutes forwards and then 30 backwards, and then I'll come back and we'll couple it up to something and we'll see what it's like as a hauler. Okay, don't go anywhere, I'll be right back. Okay, there we go, that is running in complete, and on the whole, yeah, that was absolutely fine. No issues with derailments or stuttering away from the points. In the end, I did have to run this in at slightly faster than 50% speed because it did keep cutting out on the points, which really could have been better given the wide wheelbase of this loco. I've got other models in the collection with a smaller wheelbase than this that don't do that, so it is the loco to blame. Also, I am surprised given the size of the flywheel that we don't have more of a flywheel effect in this loco. It's running fully now, so it should, well, it should be as loose as it's going to get. And I cut it off, it stops dead. So it's not that free of a mechanism, according to that. The Bachmann one, if you remember, keeps going for ages when you cut its power. So yeah, it's not the greatest in the world, but in terms of the actual performance, it is lovely. The gearing is super smart in this. So with that, let's try a crawl. I'll ease this up really steadily. And you can see that, well, I think we could call that impossibly slow, can't we? It's quite amazing. And also, the whole spectrum of speeds is perfectly controllable. So you can accelerate really smoothly. Look at that. Yeah, it's a very, very well-geared loco. Possibly one of the best I've ever seen, actually. It is slower than Bachmann's as well. I tested that. Yeah, so it's more realistic than Bachmann's from a performance standpoint. The mechanism is definitely better, and the performance is better as well. But of course you pay very dearly for those improvements, and as I've mentioned earlier on, there are areas where the Bachmann model is better than this, so it's tricky to know which to recommend. The pulling power comes in at 0.31 newtons, which is quite a bit less than the Bachmann 08. Again, the Bachmann one was quite a bit heavier than this. However, that should still allow this to haul about 20 coaches on straight and level track, and I think for an 08 shunter you can't really complain about that. So not as good as Bachmann's, but still more than adequate, I would say. So as a bit of a haulage test, I've set up some of these reasonably modern looking wagons, because it's a fairly modern looking livery, I think, and we'll see how she gets on with those, although there does seem to be no issue at all with torque. I mean, let me try that again. Let's ease this up. Look at that, even at the slow speeds, it's able to turn its wheels. And at 50, no issue whatsoever. It's almost like my finger's not there at all. So good torque, decent weight. Let's go and couple up to the wagons and see what the couplings are like. Slight mismatch in the couplings due to the wagons I've chosen, so if there are any problems I'll bring something else in. But that sounded good from where I'm sitting. Let's have a look. Yeah, it's got it. The couplings look to be at about the right height. Yeah, no real issue with that, and they coupled fine too. So with that, let's move off. Let's see how it gets on with a load. Okay, well, let's make use of this amazing loco's ability to crawl and start very smoothly. You know, I'd challenge a real 08 to start more smoothly than this. Yeah, lovely. And let's go up to 50% speed and hope that it's not going to cut out on the points. All right. And to show you the difference in speed, on the middle line I've got an 08 shunter by Bachmann, and I've put this at 50% speed. In fact, I'll go a bit higher for now just to get it in shot. And then back down to 50. And yeah, you can see the difference there. The Bachmann one, much, much faster. And the Hornby one stopped on the points. And again, there we go. Yes, pity about the unreliability on the points. And then on the inside line, I've got my other modern-ish 08 shunter, also by Bachmann, and it's coming in right now, also in the BR green. Begs the question though, which 08 shunter is the best, the Hornby or the Bachmann? Comment down below and let me know, because there's pros and cons in each. It's quite a difficult one to call. So from what I've seen of this loco's torque, I'll be very, very surprised if it struggles with these, but I need to test it, so let's see how it goes. Yes, really wonderful to see a loco run this slowly and have this much power to it. Yeah, it's actually quite unique in the collection from that perspective. Even the Bachmann one isn't quite as good as this. And yeah, sure enough, no slowing down, no issues whatsoever. Looks absolutely fine. So apart from the slight issues across the points, the performance is pretty much faultless. Lots of power, seems to be nice and smooth, still nice and quiet now that it's running, and loads of torque as well. It is a real shame about the lack of lighting. A lot of Bachmann's latest models and shunters and such, those have had at the very least working cab lights, and there are shunters out there that have working lamps and such as well. To say this has neither, and it cost £185 at the full price, is a little bit disappointing. Otherwise though, in terms of how the model looks, yeah, it's a really impressive loco, very, very complex. So from that perspective, you can see why it would need to be relatively expensive. It's just in order for it to be the complete package, I would expect more features and slightly better quality, so do bear that in mind. Things are a little bit different if you're paying a discount. I mean, I got this for considerably cheaper than the RRP, and in those cases, yeah, the value is definitely a little bit better. As long as you arm yourself with knowledge on what the model is actually like, then sure, I could recommend picking this up for a decent discount. But there it is, the Hornby 08 shunter, looking fantastic, hauling quite happily, and it's quite interesting how different this is from the Bachmann 08. Let's have some ratings then for the Hornby Class 08 shunter. Level of detail I've given 4-star. It's a very, very impressive loco in terms of detail, but I would question whether some of the details are the right details. I mean, the things like the pipework and all the little separately fitted handles and different parts, those are all great and they really add a lot to the model. But then there are other slightly more frivolous details like the opening doors, which really don't add much to the model, and in some ways they even detract from it because those doors don't look great when they're left alone. And it's kind of frustrating because it's got features like the opening doors, which you're not really going to use, and yet it doesn't have features like lighting, which you could make use of all the time while the model is running, and that detail would have a lot more value. So I've knocked it down for that. If it had some lights and things like screw-link couplings and more cab detail, then I think I would have given it a 5, but otherwise, yeah, the detail is good. Similarly, the performance is fantastic, if not perfect. It is fantastic at the slow speeds, the crawl is really good, it's nice and reliable around the track, no issues with derailments or anything like that, nice and smooth, consistent runner. However, it's not the most reliable across the points. And that's surprising because I've got other smaller 060 locomotives with a smaller wheelbase than this that don't struggle on those points. So I can pretty much blame the loco for that. I think better pickups, more accessible pickups that you can clean and adjust a bit better would have served this well. Pulling power though really isn't too bad, 0.31 newtons, that is less than the Bachmann 08 Shunter because it's a slightly lighter loco too, but around 20 coaches on straight and level track, that's definitely not bad for an 08 Shunter. The mechanism similarly is really good. Lots of high quality features on this loco, all-wheel pickup, you've got proper bearings on the driving axles, reasonably easy access I would say to the innards, quality massive 5-pole motor with a flywheel, which is great, but there are a few things that let it down on the mechanism. The pickups are quite difficult to access and clean. You've got a slightly dated 8-pin socket, and there's no provision for sound really, no pre-fitted speaker for example. Yeah, I think these days if a model's going to get a 5 from me on mechanism, it really can't be missing features like this. And that brings us on to the quality then, which is possibly one of the weakest areas of this model. It's not terrible by any means, and the decoration is certainly achieved to a high standard, but there are assembly issues with this, parts where the paint has been broken off, parts that haven't been fitted that well, visible glue in areas, and also marks on the bodywork where the loco hasn't been handled correctly. You've also got the issue of plastic construction, which for such an expensive loco seems quite surprising. So I've knocked it off a couple of stars. I think if anything that's quite generous. Yeah, not the greatest quality in the world. Value for money then, I think for £185.99 this is a bit of a joke. Yes, it's a complex model, but it's built mostly with plastic, it's missing most modern features such as lighting and speakers, and the build quality leaves quite a bit to be desired at that price. I got this for a decent discount of £129.99, but I still think I've picked up better value models than this, even as recently as this year. So I've split the difference and given it 3-star. I would say on this occasion, for once, Bachmann offers better value than Hornby. So overall that is 7.04 out of 10. The other year I gave the Bachmann 08 7.30 out of 10, so it's just slightly better is Bachmann's, and that's a grade of E, not too far off a D. Into the logbook we go then, 7th place above the Dapol B4 and below the Bachmann Hudson. I think if it was more reasonably priced, slightly higher quality and had a few more features, then this could be a really compelling model. Instead we've got Bachmann's 08, which is only slightly simpler but much cheaper. Not entirely sure which I'd recommend. I think though it would be Bachmann's. Well folks, there you have it. Those are my thoughts on the 08 Shunter. But I'd be really interested to hear what you think about this. Obviously this model has been around for quite a while, as I understand it. So if you've got one of these, when did you get it? How old is it? Is it any different to mine? Does the performance seem any different? I'm just interested because, like I said at the start, I've heard a lot of conflicting information on what people think about these and how they run and such. So I'd love to sort of learn more about that and see how other people's 08s from Hornby run and are. So yeah, if you've got anything like that to share, please do down in the comments. And also let me know what you think about the review. Was I too harsh? Was I not harsh enough? Do also share that. For now though, I will say thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon for another review. Alright, cheers folks, you take care, I'll catch you on the next one.